Chapter 1. The Flight into the Green Hell. Imagine that you are sitting in a plane at an altitude of 10,000 feet. Outside it is dark, thunder is roaring, and suddenly, lightning strikes the wing of the aircraft. In the very next moment, the plane breaks apart in midair, and you, still strapped to your seat, begin falling through the clouds toward the most dangerous jungle on Earth. This is not a movie plot, but the true story of 17-year-old Juliane Koepcke. This is the story of a girl who fell from the sky and returned after defeating death. The departure, December 24, 1971. The capital of Peru, Lima, was filled with Christmas excitement. Everyone was eager to reunite with their families. 17-year-old Juliane and her mother, Juliane Koepcke, were also waiting for their flight to Pucallpa. There, Juliane's father, Hans Wilhelm, was waiting for them. Juliane was not an ordinary girl. Her parents were famous biologists who had built a research station deep in the Amazon jungle. Juliane had spent a large part of her life there. She knew how to survive in the jungle, which fish were dangerous and which paths could lead to death. But that day, fate had written something very different for her. The fatal choice. They decided to board LANSA Flight 508. At the time, the airline's reputation was very poor. 2 of its planes had already crashed. Juliane's father had warned them not to take the flight, but because of Christmas, all other flights were fully booked. This was the only option. The plane took off. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. Passengers were drinking juice and talking. But as soon as the plane reached above the Amazon, the weather suddenly changed. The sky turned pitch black, and massive clouds surrounded the aircraft. The seconds of terror. The turbulence became so violent that the plane was tossed around like a toy. People began screaming. The flight attendants tried to control the situation, but then a massive explosion occurred. Juliane saw lightning strike the right wing of the plane, and the engine burst into flames. Her mother grabbed her hand and said only one thing: "It's all over now." The very next second, the plane split apart. Juliane only remembered that she was no longer inside the aircraft. She was falling through dark clouds, still strapped to her seat. The roar of the engines had vanished. All that remained was the whistling of the wind. She was falling from 10,000 feet toward the densest jungle in the world, the Amazon. The miracle landing. Surviving a fall from 10,000 feet is considered impossible. But a miracle happened with Juliane. The row of seats she was attached to began spinning in the air like a helicopter blade. This auto-rotation slightly reduced her falling speed. Below her was the Amazon's green canopy, a thick layer of treetops. Juliane crashed through branches and leaves before hitting the soft, wet ground of the jungle. The trees absorbed much of the impact. When she opened her eyes, it was afternoon. Her glasses were gone. One eye was swollen shut. Her collarbone was broken, and she had a deep wound on her arm. But the most astonishing thing was this: she was alive. She looked around. There was no plane, no people, only trees and the strange sounds of birds. A 17-year-old girl, badly injured, stood completely alone in the middle of the largest and most dangerous jungle on Earth. She knew that if she stayed there, death was certain. She had to move forward, but where? Chapter 1 end. Juliane Koepcke, the Amazon Miracle. Chapter 2. The Search for the Mother and the Water Rule, the Waking Nightmare. When Juliane opened her eyes for the first few minutes, she couldn't understand where she was. All she could see in front of her was a blur of green. She tried to move her arm, but a wave of intense pain shot through her entire body. Because of her broken collarbone, she realized that she was still strapped to her airplane seat. She lay there in a semi-conscious state all day and all night. The Amazon rain fell directly onto her wounds. The next morning, December 25th, Christmas Day, she gathered her courage and unfastened the seatbelt. She stood up but immediately felt dizzy and collapsed. She was extremely thirsty, and one of her eyes was completely swollen shut. The search for Maria. Her first thought was of her mother. "Mama," she shouted, but the silence of the jungle swallowed her voice. She began crawling around the wreckage, hoping that her mother might have fallen nearby. She found a few airplane seats and scattered luggage, but no people. Suddenly, she found a bag. When she opened it, she discovered some Christmas candies inside. This would be the only food she had for many days. She tried to continue searching for her mother, but the dense jungle and her weakness forced her to stop. She slowly realized that her mother was probably no longer alive. A 17-year-old girl was now completely alone in the world's greatest green hell, the wisdom of the father. Juliane remembered something her father, Hans Wilhelm, had always taught her. If you ever get lost in the jungle, Always look for water. A small stream leads to a bigger river, and a bigger river leads to human settlements. Finding direction in the Amazon is nearly impossible because every tree looks the same. People often walk in circles, return to the same place, and eventually die from exhaustion. Juliane decided she would not look for mountains or paths. She would only follow the sound of flowing water. The first stream. With injured feet and a torn sandal, she began to walk. She soon found a small stream and started following it. The water reached up to her knees, but the ground was muddy and filled with poisonous insects. She noticed flies settling on her wounds. Night was approaching. Nights in the Amazon are terrifying. Jaguars, black caimans, crocodilians, and poisonous snakes come out to hunt after dark. Juliane found a spot beneath a large tree and tried to sleep. Strange, chilling sounds echoed from every direction. She wondered, will I see tomorrow's sunrise? But her will to survive was so strong that she refused to give up. The invisible enemy. As she continued walking along the stream, she noticed that the wound on her arm was getting worse. Flies had laid eggs inside it, and now maggots were eating her flesh. The pain was unbearable, but she had no medicine. She ate a small piece of the Christmas candy and drank water to ease her hunger. She knew that the real enemy was not the jungle animals, but infection and starvation. She looked at the flowing water of the stream and thought, "This river is my destination." She kept moving forward, unaware that this journey would last another 10 days. Chapter 2. End. Chapter 3. The hunger and the crawling flesh. The sound of engines. By the third day, day 3, Juliane's strength was beginning to fail. She heard the sound of helicopters and rescue planes overhead. She screamed wildly, "Here, I'm here!" But the Amazon jungle is so dense that the ground cannot be seen from above. All those aircraft could see was endless green, not a 17-year-old girl. Juliane realized that no one was coming to find her. She would have to escape this trap of death on her own. The agony of infection. Juliane's greatest enemy was now her own body. The deep wound on her left arm had begun to rot. Flies had laid eggs inside it, and now hundreds of white maggots were crawling beneath her skin. Every movement felt like something was tearing her flesh from the inside. The pain was so intense that she could not sleep at night. But she did not give up. She knew that if she stopped, the maggots would eat her alive. The loss of senses. Her suffering increased when an old weakness became a serious problem. During the fall, she had lost her glasses and she was extremely nearsighted. She could barely see at a distance. Now she had to bend down and look closely at the ground just to find her way. One of her eyes was swollen shut, and with the other she could only see blurred shapes. She kept falling, crashing into thorny bushes, but she never left the riverbank and the water nightmare. The stream was slowly growing wider, which meant more dangerous animals could be present. She saw large stingrays and electric eels in the water. One wrong step and death was certain. She decided that instead of walking through the muddy banks, she would travel through the middle of the stream, floating or wading, because the banks were more dangerous, filled with venomous snakes and the threat of jaguars. The last candy. She ate the last piece of her Christmas candy. Now she had nothing left to eat. She tried to look for jungle fruits, but remembered her father's warning. If birds are not eating a fruit, neither should you. She saw fruit scattered everywhere, but birds did not touch them. They were poisonous. For many days after that, she survived on nothing but water. Her weight dropped rapidly, her bones began to show, and she became a walking corpse, moving forward only with the hope of seeing her father again. Chapter 3. End. Chapter 4. The river monsters and the night of delirium. Into the deep water. By the 5th day, day 5, the small stream had turned into a wide and deep river. Juliane's body had grown so weak that walking through bushes and muddy ground was no longer possible. She made a life-threatening decision. She jumped into the middle of the river and let the current carry her forward. But Amazon rivers are not ordinary waters. They are home to some of the deadliest predators on Earth. As Juliane floated, she saw huge black caimans, giant Amazon crocodilians resting along the riverbanks. She knew that if she went anywhere near the shore, they would tear her apart. She tried to stay in the very center of the river, where the water was deeper and colder. The invisible threats. Death was waiting for her even beneath the surface. Piranhas and stingrays are common in the Amazon. Juliane already had open wounds, and the smell of blood can attract piranhas. Yet perhaps her luck was extraordinary. or perhaps even death stepped back after witnessing her will to survive. For hours she drifted in the water, her body turning blue from the cold, but she did not stop. The state of delirium. Hunger and lack of sleep were now affecting Juliane's mind. She began to experience hallucinations. She thought she saw a house ahead, or heard someone calling her name, but when she moved closer, it was only an old tree or a rock. One night, as she lay on a wet riverbank, she felt as if her mother was lying beside her, gently stroking her hair. When she reached out her hand, there was nothing but debris and wet soil. She began to cry, but her body was so dehydrated that no tears came. The night of horror. Nights in the Amazon are never silent. Screams of monkeys and the sounds of unknown creatures echoed from every direction. Juliane had moved beyond fear. She was in a state where a human becomes nothing more than a survival machine. The maggots in her arm had grown so large that she could feel them moving beneath her skin. In desperation, she tried to remove them, but her fingernails had become so soft and weak that she couldn't do anything. The sight of life. On the afternoon of the 7th day, day 7, Juliane saw something that revived her fading hope. On the riverbank, she spotted an old wooden boat tied to a tree. She thought it was another hallucination and rubbed her eyes, but the boat was real. It was proof that somewhere in this jungle, humans still existed. Gathering every last bit of strength she had, Juliane began moving toward the boat. Was this her destination or just another test? Chapter 4, End. Chapter 5, The Gasoline Cure and the Shelter, The Abandoned Hut. On the 9th day, day 9, when Juliane saw the boat, she felt that she might finally be saved. Near the boat, a small path led into the jungle. Crawling on her knees, she followed it and soon saw a small hut. The hut was open on all sides with a roof made of palm leaves. There were no people there, but it was clearly a temporary shelter used by a hunter or a woodcutter. Juliane tried to go inside, but her body could no longer support her. She collapsed onto the hard ground. Outside, heavy rain was pouring down, but the hut's roof gave her a little dryness for the first time in 9 days. Inside, she noticed an old outboard motor, and nearby there was a gallon of gasoline, petrol. The brutal surgery. Juliane remembered something from her childhood. Once, her father had cleaned their dog's wound with petrol to kill maggots. Gathering all her courage, Juliane picked up the gasoline container. She poured the petrol onto the rotting wound on her arm, where hundreds of maggots were alive. The pain was worse than the impact of the plane crash itself. As soon as the petrol touched the wound, the maggots began to writhe and tried to crawl out. Screaming in agony, Juliane pulled out around 30 to 40 large maggots with her own hand. Blood and pus poured from the wound, but she felt relief knowing they were no longer eating her from the inside. She collapsed unconscious right there. The night of survival. That night, Juliane tried to sleep in the hut, but the Amazon rain and cold made her shiver uncontrollably. Her body was burning with fever. She feared that if she fell asleep, she might never wake up. She spent the entire night awake, repeatedly looking outside, hoping the owner of the boat would return. But outside there was only the darkness of the jungle and the sound of relentless rain, the decision to wait. When morning came, Juliane thought about taking the boat and going down the river, but she didn't have enough strength to untie the rope or operate it. She decided to stay and wait. She knew this was her last hope. She drank the dirty river water and sat there watching the path. Every passing hour brought her closer to death, but her eyes remained fixed on the river, waiting for an angel in human form to pass by. Chapter 5, End. Chapter 6, The Encounter and the Rescue. The Sound of Human Voices, Day 10. Juliane was lying in the hut waiting for death. Her body was no longer capable of moving. Suddenly in the evening, she heard voices coming from the river. At first she thought it was another hallucination, but the sounds kept getting closer. They were not birds or jungle noises, they were human voices. 3 Peruvian woodcutters were returning to their hut after a long day of work. When they looked inside, they stepped back in fear. Before them sat a girl with one eye red with blood, her clothes torn to rags and her skin clinging to her bones. They thought she was a jungle water spirit, Yara, a spirit believed to kill lost travelers. The first contact. Juliane gathered all her remaining strength and spoke in Spanish. "I am a girl who survived a plane crash. My name is Juliane." Hearing her words, their fear vanished. They rushed to her side. They had never seen anyone alive in such terrible condition. They gave her a little food, yucca, a type of root, and salt. But after 10 days without food, Juliane's stomach could not digest anything. The woodcutters' mercy. The woodcutters cleaned Juliane's wounds. They saw that many maggots had died because of the petrol, but the wound was still deep. They cared for her throughout the night. The next morning, day 11, they placed Juliane in their boat and began the journey down the river. The trip lasted 7 hours. Juliane lay in the boat looking up at the sky, the same sky from which she had fallen 11 days earlier. The return to civilization. They took her to a small village called Tornavista. There, a local pilot saw Juliane and immediately recognized her as the girl the entire world had been searching for. She was rushed to a small hospital. When the news spread that a survivor of LANSA Flight 508 had been found, it sent shockwaves around the world. No one could believe that a 17-year-old girl could fall from 10,000 feet, survive alone in the Amazon's green hell for 11 days, and return alive. The reunion. The pilot asked Juliane where her father was. When her father, Hans Wilhelm, received the news, he rushed to the hospital. When father and daughter embraced, tears filled the eyes of everyone present. But amid this joy, one painful question still remained. Where was Juliane's mother, Maria? Had she also survived somewhere in the jungle? Chapter 6, End. Chapter 7, The Gruesome Discovery and the Investigation, The Search for the Fallen. Juliane was now lying in a hospital bed, but her ordeal was not over yet. Rescue teams and the Peruvian military asked her to help them locate the place where she had fallen. Her mind was exhausted, but she forced herself to remember. She told them that she had seen a cross-shaped tree while falling and remembered a specific bend in a river. She marked these details on maps. Her information was so precise that helicopters found the plane's wreckage the very next day. But what the rescue team saw there was enough to shake them to their core. The scene of horror. Amid the dense Amazon forest, pieces of the aircraft were scattered everywhere. When rescuers descended, they confirmed that apart from Juliane, no one else had survived. Out of the 92 passengers on board, nearly all had died at the moment of impact. The most heartbreaking discovery was the body of Juliane's mother, Juliane Koepcke. Maria's body was found some distance away from the wreckage. The investigation revealed that she had also survived the fall initially, but her bones were so badly broken that she could not move. She suffered there for several days before finally dying from her injuries. When Juliane learned this, her heart shattered. She realized that while she was wandering through the jungle, her mother might have been calling out for help just a short distance away. The scandal of LANSA Flight 508. When the investigation began, a horrifying truth came to light. The disaster was not caused by lightning alone, it was the result of human negligence. LANSA Airline was operating old and poorly maintained aircraft. Their engineers had performed only superficial maintenance. The lightning strike caused the wing to break because the plane's structure had become weak and outdated. After this tragedy, LANSA Airlines' license was permanently revoked. Aviation rules around the world were tightened to ensure that no one else would ever fall from 10,000 feet the way Juliane did. The survivor's guilt. Juliane was physically recovering, but the psychological scars ran deep. She began to suffer from survivor's guilt, the feeling of why did I survive while everyone else died? When she tried to sleep, she heard the sounds of the plane breaking apart and her mother's final scream. But her father explained to her that her life was a gift and that she had been spared for a greater purpose. Juliane decided that she would dedicate the rest of her life to the mountains and jungles that had returned her from the jaws of death. Chapter 7, End. Chapter 8, The Legacy of the Survivor, the Woman of the Forest. A few months after the disaster, Juliane left Peru and moved to Germany, but her heart always remained trapped among the dense trees of the Amazon. She completed her education and followed in her parents' footsteps, becoming a biologist. She earned a PhD in mammalogy, the study of mammals, and returned to the very jungle that had tried to swallow her in 1971, this time for research. She rebuilt the Panguana research station that her father had founded. The girl who once drifted through rivers in fear of death became one of the strongest voices protecting that jungle. She dedicated her entire life to preserving the animals and forests of the Amazon, facing the past. In 1998, nearly 27 years later, Juliane returned to the crash site with famous filmmaker Werner Herzog to shoot the documentary Wings of Hope. She saw the wreckage of the plane now covered in rust. She stood at the place where her mother had taken her last breath. Juliane said that even after all these years, whenever she sees lightning flash in the sky, her heart still skips a beat. But she is no longer afraid. She knows she has already defeated death. The message to the world. Juliane Koepcke's story is not just about survival, it shows the power of knowledge. If Juliane had not learned how to live in the jungle from her father, she would have died on the very first day. Her story teaches us that even in the most difficult times, if your mind stays calm and you hold on to the will to live, nature itself begins to support you. Today, Juliane is a successful scientist and writer. Her book, When I Fell from the Sky, has inspired millions around the world. She is still alive today, reminding the world that miracles do happen. But to make them real, you must take the first step yourself. The 17-year-old girl who fell from the sky is now a symbol, a soul that neither a 10,000-foot fall, nor the deadly Amazon jungle, nor endless loneliness could ever defeat. Friends, Juliane's story ends here, but the question is, if you were in her place, could you survive for 11 days in that green hell? Let us know in the comments. I am your host, and you are watching Alvor Prime. Subscribe for more incredible true stories like this one. Until the next video, take care. Bye. Chapter 8. End.